Starting with Team Finland, guys, and Case, why don't you take it away?
Yeah, Finland, also known as the Florida Hurricane Stars. I'm not gonna.
Glad you made that point before I did. I thought the same thing.
I'm going to switch things up to how I did it last week. I'm going to go forwards, defense, goalies, and I got lines here, of course. So first line is Lehkonen, Barkov, and Rantanen. That's going to be a great line. Three great players there. Lehkonen, hopefully he's in full swing by then, and playing with his teammate Rantanen was a no-brainer for me. Then Teravainen, Aho, Hintz, Michelli, Lundell, Laine, Luosterainen, Haula, and Granlund. And my extra is Kotkaniemi. If Laine is not playing, for some reason still not playing, then Kotkaniemi slides in and Tolvanen is called up. On defense, Heiskanen with Ristolainen, Lindell with Hakanpää, Mikkola with Jokiharju, and the extra is Valimaki, goalies, Saros, Husso, UPL.
Damn. That is a pretty similar roster to what I have. I have slightly different lines, though, and I'll go through them now. So, as Case mentioned, this is the Panthers and the Canes and the Stars, basically, all jumbled together. And that's what my lineup looks like. So, I've got some, basically all the same players, just playing in different positions based on what I thought the lines could potentially look like. So, my first line, I have Hintz, Aho, and Rantanen. My second line, I have Michelli, Barkov, and Teravainen. My third line, I have Lehkonen, Lundell, and Tolvanen. And my fourth line, I have Haula, Kotkaniemi, and Laine if he's playing. And my extra is Luosterainen. Honorable mentions, though, have to go to Granlund and Kakko, because Kakko is a player who has clearly a high ceiling, or had a high ceiling one day, but can also play defense. So it depends, what you're looking for in these players. And then on the back end, I have Jokiharju and Heiskanen, Valimaki and Ristolainen, Mikkola and Lundell, and the extra is Olli Mata. And in net, I have Saros, UPL, and Ville Husso.
Leaving Hakanpää out is baffling to me.
Yeah.
That guy's a banger, for sure.
Okay, Harp?
Well, Case, my roster looks very similar to yours. The top 9 is exactly the same, and I think they're I know.
Can you come on, really?
It is.
Well, it's a no-brainer, Chad.
Yeah.
You should see when I filled out this document. I'm telling you, it was a few hours before we hopped on. It's not like I just made this now. I promise. You won't.
Okay, well, let's hear it
twice.
Let's hear the rest. What is happening right now? Let's hear the rest of the lineup.
Okay.
Take it from the top. Let's hear it from the very start.
Okay. So Lehkonen, Barkov, Rantanen, obviously Aho, Hintz, Teravainen, Michelli, Lundell, Laine, Luosterainen, Haula, and Tolvanen, and then Granlund is my extra. So then on the back end is where it looks a little different. I've got Lindell and Heiskanen, the two Stars teammates there. Valimaki and Hakanpää. I like Valimaki. He's been pretty good in Arizona and has shown that he can be a solid top 4D. And then Mikkola and Ristolainen, which just sounds and looks like just a nasty third pair. I think is fantastic. And then Mata and Jokiharju. So if Finland wanted to, they could go 8 deep on the blue line, in my opinion. And then just the two goalies for me, Saros and Luukkonen. Have to go with Luukkonen, obviously. He's been fantastic this year. So a little different in some areas, but that's my Finnish roster.
Harper, do you have trouble listening to instructions? There is a set number of players that we have to pick for each team. You need 3 goalies. Give me one more, and you have to slash 1 defenseman.
Why?
That's how it works.
Okay.
That's how the selection process works.
Okay, so I do need a third goalie. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So,
and if you didn't get the hint from last week when both teams, all of the teams that we selected had 3 goalies, and then I made the post where all of them also had 3 goalies. You didn't clue in after that?
oh,
No?
okay, all right. So yes,
So just-
Huso would be the third goalie, and then we'll take out Mata, and Jokiharju is the extra defenseman. So there we go.
Oh my God, that was baffling. But a lot of similarities, I think, at the end of the day. It took a while. I think the main one that you guys are going to come at me for is leaving off Yanni Hakanpää. Is that right, Case?
Yeah, I think that he's probably the third best defenseman on this team. And the fact that, his line mate, his pair mate is on this team just makes a ton of sense to have him playing with him. He's currently out of the lineup, so he's not playing with any of these guys, but he plays with Lindell. So I thought it'd make a lot of sense for him to play with him in this tournament, especially when he plays such a physical, like grinding game on defense. You're going to need that playing Team Canada and USA and Sweden. So made a lot of sense for me. Like I paired Heiskanen with Ruotsalainen because I feel like Ruotsalainen has to be on this team because they aren't very deep on defense. He is massive. He's played in the NHL for a long time. He was a very talented player at one point, and Heiskanen is just like all Ruotsalainen has to do is hit one guy and get the puck towards Heiskanen. That's his job. Like just make sure Heiskanen has the puck because Heiskanen is a one-man breakout. So you don't need a second defenseman passing the puck when you have Heiskanen.
Yeah, that's fair. And then I think you had Välimäki as your extra, right? And that was a guy I had slotted higher in the lineup. So I guess it's preference.
If they're struggling to score, get Välimäki in there. But
yeah,
for defense, I'm going to pick a Mikkola out there instead.
Yeah, fair. I guess it depends what kind of you're looking for. But I'll be honest, when I was going through and creating the D pairings on this team, I had a really hard time because right now on Dallas, both Heiskanen and Lindell are listed as playing on the right side. I wasn't sure if that was something that happened all the time, which made it a bit more complicated for me because I know Jokiharju typically plays the right side as well next to Dahlin, who plays the left, or at least, again, that's how it's listed on Daily Faceoff. So I had a hard time coming up with left-right pairings because it's not always as simple as who shoots left, who shoots right.
Heiskanen naturally plays on the right as a left shot, and Lindell usually plays on the left when Hakanpää is in the lineup.
Okay, so that's what I was kind of wondering about because, yeah, like I said, Lindell is playing on the right side now. I did want to include Mikkola on the third pair because I think that's just a tough guy to play with. But if I were to do it again, I would probably have Hakanpää. I think he slipped my mind because he's out right now. Like because he's injured. I don't have a good argument against him. So I think maybe he would slot into my 7 instead of a guy like Olli Mata. I know that Hakanpää logs way more minutes than a lot of other guys on this back end too. So maybe that does make more sense. And I'll change my team.
I'm also interested in your top 6 here. You got Barkov playing on the second line, which I think is interesting. And splitting up Teravainen and Aho is interesting as well.
Yes, and I have an explanation for this. Originally, I wanted to play Hintz, Aho, and Barkov all on the top line because I think they can all play first line center, but I ended up picking 2. And what I did with splitting them up, I put the 2 most capable centers, in my opinion, on 2 separate lines to drive their own line. And when I look at that second line with Barkov, Maccelli, and Teravainen, I think that that's incredibly dynamic, but with having Barkov there, it might allow those 2 wingers to be more impactful and allow Barkov to kind of not worry so much about driving offense, but just play a more defensive style. So that was my thinking there. And then, of course, that leaves the top line with Hintz, Aho, and Rantanen. And that is just, however you look at it, like that's a dynamic offensive line.
Yeah.
Maccelli is a gifted passer too. Sorry, Case.
Yeah, I was just trying to have I was trying to keep center strong, same as you, but then have kind of 2 offensive drivers with one, I'm not going to call them like piggyback player, but a scorer who needs to get the puck to them in a Teravainen and a Lehkonen. That's how I was setting it up. And yeah, Harp, Maccelli, offensive gifted passer. Like that's why I like the idea of him playing with a line A, as well as Lundell is just, he's a strong center. I like watching him play.
Yeah, I wanted to slide Line A up the lineup actually, but wherever I slotted him in, it just didn't make a ton of sense. Because like, you know, like, are you going to play him in the top 6 on my roster with like Barkov? No, probably not. Barkov would go insane, I think. You know, are you going to play him on a third line that's supposed to be more defensive oriented? Probably not either. So that's what I had a hard time with.
Going back to Corey's question here, I think that a situation where that's going to come up here for me is that, you know, if Line A is kind of struggling like he is today, he's not playing right now, he's taking an absence. But, you know, if next year he's back in the swing of things and he's still not that 40 goal guy like he used to be, and he struggles a bit, and a guy like Eli Tolvanen is, you know, producing on Seattle and stepping up as a goal scorer for that team, which they always need, I still think that Line A would get the nod over Tolvanen. I think that,
true.
You know, he's an important Finnish hockey player. His name value will pull weight in that dressing room for the fans, everything. And, you know, the history of him being a second overall pick and him being a talented goal scorer, big for them in the World Juniors. I just think that he's going to get picked over a guy who's producing kind of out of the blue.
Yeah, that's true. And so then when it comes to goaltending, we all had the same 3, right? Harper, you also had Saros, UPL, and Husso. Is that right?
Yeah, I don't know who else would be in there.
Well,
I mean, you're
Ranta.
not. Yeah,
there's Ranta and
There's
Kakkonen.
Korpisalo too, like, and you're not putting him in there.
Oh boy,
you could go a Predators tandem, get Lankinen in there as well.
Yeah, that's true.
Could. Kakkonen is an interesting one. He's actually had like decent underlying numbers on a terrible Sharks team this year.
Yeah, I wasn't sold on really anybody outside of Saros. I think it could depend on who's playing the best next year. Like, I think UPL has been good this year, but it's taken him forever. And I know Husso has been terrible in stints, but good in stints in his career. So it's really like that. And that's why I think goaltending is obviously the position where you feel the least confident picking 3 guys, because it's all going to depend on who's going. But I think Saros is like the lock for
I
starter.
agree, but for the most part, when it comes to USA and Sweden, I feel like those are your 3 goalies, unless Ottinger's shitting the bed next year, terrible, and Swayman, like Olmark's gone from Boston and Swayman's a full-time starter and playing great, then maybe that's when you take the guy with the hot hand. But for the most part on USA and Sweden, I'm going with those 3 sets.
Yeah,
those 2 sets of 3. But Canada and Finland, it's going to be the hot hand.
It's a toss-up too. Like these 2 teams, their goaltending is way worse than the first 2 teams that we covered. Like, you're right. Those 6 goalies that we talked about last episode for USA and Sweden, like, those are top tier goalies, all of them. And then between these 2 teams, I think there's one like solidified top tier goalie in Saros.
Yeah. Let's say, hypothetically, Hellebuck has a 900 save percentage going into this tournament next year.
He's on the team.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep,
What about
exactly?
What about Demko? I don't think he gets the respect that Hellebuck does, but I think he's just as good. So I wonder if he has a 900, or say he has like an 870 through 20 games or something, like,
or if he's hurt.
Well, that too. Injuries are different though, right? Because then we're talking about
Yeah, that's a whole different thing.
Yeah.
Guy's in. He's hurt.
Yeah. It's interesting though. But anyway, is that it? Is that all that we have on Finland? Anything else to add?
I was just gonna, before we wrap up on the Finns, I was just gonna say, like, looking at this back end, I mean, it looks like with how big all these guys are, like, it's a back end you'd want in the Stanley Cup playoffs. Like, everyone is at least like everyone's 6'2" and above. If you were to throw Yoki Haru in there as your extra defenseman, I think he's 6 feet and he'd be the smallest guy. It is a nasty defense. And then with the goaltending, again, if UPL is doing what he's doing right now next season around this time, I mean, he has to be on this team, I think.
Yeah, well, I mean, Saros is going to look really good coming into this tournament next year playing for the Devils.
Actually, Saros, that almost like perfectly matches the question that we were talking about, because that's a guy this season who hasn't been as good as he typically is. You know, he's on the team. He's the starter. Like, it's not like he's the starter, even though he hasn't been great this year. But you're right, Case. I think a change of scenery, maybe to the Devils, could be beneficial for him.